Some would say Ricardo Baca has the best job ever in journalism. When can you get stoned and paid for it if you're not a rock star? Ricardo, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
All right, you were the first hire for the Denver Post's Cannabist section. This, and let me see if I got this right. This is an online, basically, news source on and about the cannabis business and the cannabis lifestyle and the cannabis culture. Am I got that basically right?
Exactly. Yeah, and ultimately, Greg Moore and Kevin Dale, former editors at the Post, hired me to create the Cannabist.
So, and they were stoned when they did that? Is that?
I have no idea.
I got a great idea.
They were pretty sober when they approached me about, hey, you want to be our weed editor? And I said, sure.
And this, as many jokes as around it, this was really a revolutionary thing for a newspaper to do, which was to carve out a little something for this very bizarre, very new, still very illegal from a federal point of view, market and culture, but legal on the state level. Was there a lot of fear when that happened? I mean, did you jump at this job, or was it one of those things, this could be a career ender?
You know, I certainly took 24 hours and talked with my wife and my mom about it, but I was pretty much there to tell them this is why this is a good thing, and they understood that very quickly, and so I was all about it. It was certainly bold for the Post to go out on a limb and do this, but when you also think about it from the perspective of journalism and a brand new industry that didn't exist last year or the year before,
but a very
it made
controversial
so much sense.
But a very controversial industry. And while it passed here in Colorado, there's still a large minority of people who think it's wrong, think it's evil, think it's corrupting the state. You must get some hate mail.
Definitely, and it is a large and vocal minority who's against legalization and still against pot. But I would say this is increasingly less controversial.
This is a profit center for the Post. Greg told me this, that the Cannabis actually makes a little bit of money compared to the rest of the Post, which I think also makes money, but it doesn't matter. You still guys are getting beat up in the marketplace.
Sure. Well, as Westward reported, the Post is making quite a bit of money, but you know, we're still going through some downsizing because of our corporate ownership.
Corporate overlords, yes.
But yeah, the Cannabist has been sustainable for a very long time, and we're really proud of that. We recently hired a GM specific to the Cannabist. We're hoping to get another full-time reporter here very, very soon. Hope to be able to announce that soon. And we have a full-time ad exec. So we're actually growing inside a newspaper that's shrinking at the moment.
Is this starting to change from, oh my God, we've got this new market, this new place, new regulations every year. The regulations seem to change from the states. How do we label this? And some really interesting stuff. And now turning into a consumer guide. I mean, you're basically, you're the wine critic of pot. Is that a good way to put this?
Not quite. See, I'm the marijuana editor, but I have hired multiple marijuana critics, and
really?
That's essential because I don't smoke weed. I just eat edibles and occasionally vaporize. So yeah, I hire people.
For those people who don't know,
experts.
when you say vaporize, it doesn't mean you've been hit with a ray gun. This is a way of smoking the dope. All right.
Exactly.
So you hire tasters basically, and they try it out. And what is it judged on? I mean, I know in the wine world you've got color and bouquet and smell and legs, and I don't understand it. I couldn't even begin to what is a review on pot like?
You know, there have been some really
fun... why does every review start with, dude, awesome?
Well, that's been the fun of it, to get away from that stereotype, right? And there have been some really great profiles of our marijuana critics inside the New York Times and the Washington Post, because ultimately these people are creating a new vocabulary for criticism. You know, they're creating a professional critical space in where one never really existed.
Give me the vocabulary that would be used rather than dude, awesome, so baked. I mean, what are the?
Our readers are learning
we hear about the mellow undertones of wine, or we see it in Cigar Aficionado, which is very classy. Am I wrong to say that people use marijuana for the effect, not so much the taste?
It just depends. We did a story one time about the best tasting strains of weed, because some of them do taste good, and it's certainly a subjective thing like wine. Some people like the really skunky, some people prefer the citrusy, some people prefer the hazes, which have their own flavor profiles.
What is a haze? Pardon me.
Oh, different strains. So like there's lemon haze, there's super OG lemon haze, there's different super silver haze, there's different strains that are classified.
What does that mean,
hazes. It's like a varietal. It's plays off a theme. So that you have the hazes, you have the diesels. They're different flavor profiles, and then there are different individual substrains within that profile.
Are you the favorite guy in the Denver Post newsroom? Is everybody like just hanging around your cubicle going, what are you trying today, Ricardo? What do you got?
Not necessarily.
You actually get free samples, don't you?
Oh yeah. The occasional, if an edible manufacturer knows that I don't smoke and they want me to try a new product, then they'll drop something off at the Post desk and I'll give it a try. For example, a company just came into the market called Zoots. They're a big player in the Pacific Northwest. It's already selling in Washington and Oregon. They just started selling in Colorado in the last month. And so I just tried their product for the first time, and it's very interesting to see what so many of my colleagues and readers have been talking about for years coming out of the Pacific Northwest.
Does the cannabis get involved in the political battle? I mean, there's no way you could be anti-pot. Your livelihood depends upon the state keeping this going.
Well, people have asked me that before, and I would disagree. I'm not anti-pot. I'm not pro-pot in a professional sense. Of course, I voted in 2012 when Colorado voted. Well, I've never talked about how I voted.
You voted for it.
But at the time,
I was a music critic. If you didn't vote for it, knock twice. Of course, you were a music critic at the Denver Post. You were already a pothead, so you voted for it.
I didn't actually consume much in 2012.
Much being a word, and a very, very vague one.
A couple times a year.
But the point being, is it fair journalism that since everybody at the Cannabist is pro-pot and likely a pot user, or is that not the venue of the Cannabist? Is the Cannabist, we're not here to talk about the politics of pot, we're here to talk about the business of pot.
It's absolutely fair journalism, because we do employ some people who, as you said, are very pro-pot. They've been, one of our columnists has been an activist for 20 years in the space, and she writes the advice column. So people write to her and say, my teenager's smoking, what should I do? Or can I fly out of Colorado with all this weed that I purchased? And she answers those questions journalistically. But it's a good source of journalism. I'd encourage you to spend time on the space. Everything that appears in the Denver Post regarding marijuana appears in the Cannabis. We have lots of original content, as well as access to AP, Washington Post, wire services.
Would the anti-pot crowd, do they get a fair shake in the Cannabis?
Oh yeah, absolutely. If we're writing about an issue that involves both of those sides, then we're going to talk to those anti-marijuana activists. But one thing that you're also starting to see is that's a shrinking field, with less resources, with less time. But certainly me and Kevin Sabet, I would consider him a friend, and he's the most important anti-legalization activist in the country, former White House advisor to multiple presidents, and the co-founder of Project SAM, which is smart approaches to marijuana.
All right, now that we've had a several-year experiment with marijuana, what has surprised you the most? I mean, and I'm also going to ask you, what hasn't worked? So what's been the biggest surprise?
Well, I think the biggest surprise to me is it kind of comes out of this 1970s, 80s public school education that I got. I was certainly
just say no
kid, a dare kid. I just bought it because my teachers, my mentors, my parents, my presidents all were telling me that marijuana was bad. And to come into this kind of golden renaissance age of information where suddenly we're realizing that, cannabis is a lot safer, a lot less addictive, a lot less deadly than alcohol. To realize that you were lied to all those years has been just kind of something that I've had to struggle with. And
were you lied to? I mean,
absolutely.
Because I know
we
people.
All were.
I know people whose lives have been ruined by pot.
Sure.
I mean,
I
know people who pot was a gateway for their kid to get into things that really ruin their lives. I also know, we all know these people who are potheads, and I'm not saying that jokingly. I'm saying these are the burnouts who are still living at their parents' basement and eating cereal all day. I mean, we know those guys who have checked out on pot. I mean, you're not going to say that that reality isn't there, are you?
I'm just saying pot is addictive, but it's less addictive than nicotine, than alcohol, than heroin, than cocaine. That's all I'm saying. Pot has about a 9% addiction rating, and that's a federal government standing. So, you know, when we're told, and are told right now, because marijuana is a Schedule I substance, you know, that is a substance with no medical ability and considered the most dangerous drug in the land. Of course, right now, DEA is considering rescheduling, and that's a big story, while certain legalization activists are pushing for complete descheduling. But, you know, there's just a lot of information that's come to light that's really shown us that, yeah, we were lied to.
What's been the biggest negative impact that you've seen from Colorado's pot? And I'll take a shot at it.
Sure.
Which is the edibles and how they're labeled has been a real problem, and I think the legislature is doing the best they can to come up with workable solutions, and I think we're getting there to get that out. But what is not working in Colorado when it comes to marijuana?
Well, I think the edibles was a situation that really snuck up on everybody. When you are that first state to regulate the sale and use of this drug for the first time in decades, first time in the modern world, really, you have no place of operation. You know that maybe you tried pot brownies in college or last week, and maybe they threw you for a loop, but nobody expected that. So that really has been probably the single biggest problem that we faced. You also have some of these outlier cases where marijuana has interacted with people's brains in a very negative way and driven them to do something that's either self-destructive or violent.
Give me an example.
Externally. You know, we've had a couple deaths that police and coroners have attributed to marijuana and other things. You know, the University Park, the Observatory Park murder, the Kirk family. You know, there was a 20-something kid who was here on vacation with his family from Oklahoma in Keystone, and you know, he took too many edibles, more than the state recommends, about 5 or 6 times more, and ended up killing himself.
What's been we're under a minute here, but what's been the best part of this? I mean, what is the most positive aspect of legalization here?
You know, we need 10 years, everybody agrees, to really figure out how this is coming out. But now we have a major state study and a major federal study showing that in those first 2 years of legalization, legal sales, teen use did not go up at all. That's a very good thing. The Colorado State Patrol just released data earlier this year showing us that stone driving, the number of stone driving arrests in 2015 actually went down from 2014. There's hope.
Good. And is there life for the cannabis? You know, as the paper's shrinking, you guys going to be around?
I hope so, and I'm told yes.
All right, people want to read it. Where do they go?
Thecannabist.co. You can find us.
Yeah, like stoners are going to be able to spell Cannabist. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you. Check me out on KHOW Radio. Look for the Independence Institute, independenceinstitute.org. We'll see you next week.